Welcome back to another exciting episode of Traveling Through the 80s with the 80s kids. As always, I'm your host, Rich Oliver, and with me is my left-hand man, Kyle Ince.
Hey ho, I'm ready to go. And I am left-handed, so perfect
Oh,
position for me.
then it all works out. Then it all works out. And to his right-hand side, staring in the corner like a little baby, is Dangerous Don Brown.
That's
There he
right.
is.
On the right hand, I knew Kyle was left because I knew he wasn't right.
Right, there you
Something
go.
about him. He wasn't right.
I've never been right. All
Glad
right.
to hear it. Excited.
Yes, today's exciting. I'm so excited about today's episode. So we have a very special guest who's here to tell us some really awesome stories. And if this is a name that you've never heard of, I'm sure after this podcast you will never forget it. We have the wonderful, talented, both director as well as previously set decorator, Mr. Roger Christian. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes,
Not
thank
at
you.
all.
you.
I'm happy to be here. I'm left-handed too, so there you go.
Yeah, awesome. There you go.
Yes, we're on the
We
left.
Southpaws.
It's the
Southpaws
lefties
unite.
versus the righters.
Yes. So thank you so much for coming, as I've said. Now, I recently read your book, as per your suggestion, which is called Cinema Alchemist, for anybody that is looking for a really fascinating read, which details your journeys, not necessarily the startups, but the journeys that you did going into becoming a set decorator, where you essentially helped shape the world that we came to know as Star Wars.
Yes, it was an auspicious beginning, really, for me, and it was all. It kind of unfolded, it's there's a long story about how it began, but that's all been covered, I think. So when I was in Mexico on Lucky Lady, I was working with John Barry and Les Dilly and Norman Reynolds. The three were handling this huge film. We had 50 boats fighting on the ocean. It was rum running in the 20s, and doing sets out of old Mexican buildings, a lot of them. And the whole thing just went out of control. And so they called me out to come and help. And I stayed with that. We had a second unit. And just to tell you, we counted 500 lunchbox one day, just to tell you how big the second unit was.
Wow.
And John Barry, because he had to go on with the first unit to Mexico City, I stayed. Anyway, that Lucky Lady was written by Gloria and Willard Hike. Gloria and
Right.
Willard Hike wrote American Graffiti,
Right.
and they wrote some of Star Wars for George, uncredited.
Right.
And they became great friends. They were wonderful raconteurs, and John Barry and I became great friends with them. And then when George was chosen by Fox to, each studio had lost their audience, so they decided to have a young director. So Universal got Spielberg and MGM got Coppola. Alan Ladd Jr. chose George because of American Graffiti. And in walks George with 20th Century Fox's worst nightmare. I'm going to make a children's fantasy sci-fi film, which there was no box office for science fiction
Right.
at all.
Right.
And Alan Ladd stuck to his kind of guns with it. And the board looked at the script and everything and said, well, this film's going to make $12 million. So in those days, they divided that by 3. And they said to George, if you could make your film for $4 million, we'll make it. And the budget that Gary got down to was 8 in America, and there were no studios free either. And up spoke 20th Century Fox in London, who said, well, with the exchange rate, and we have all the studios free in London, and we're much cheaper because there wasn't that much work going on at the time. He said, we can make your film for 4. And so Gloria and Willard, in a conversation, said, well, you better go down and meet Roger and John, because they're doing what you keep talking about, a spaghetti Western. They're doing a spaghetti Western kind of styled rum running film. And so George appeared and came just him and Gary. Well,
kind of a kismet moment, really, if you think about it.
It was. and I was building a salt factory, which was quite big at that time. You know, salt was a valuable commodity, and I was shoveling salt. And George came, picked up a shovel, thought that was the easiest way to talk. So we were shoveling together, and that's typical George.
Well, I'm sorry, you were actually building a salt. Is this for a set or just
Yeah, it
actual
was for a
business?
set. No, for
Oh,
a set.
okay, all right. I thought you were getting in the salt mine business. I'm like, Jesus.
No, this was for Lucky Lady, and there was an action scene in a salt factory. So we'd
Oh,
taken an old building and put a big sign on the front and broken it down, and then I was making miles of salt mounds and putting in old trucks and stuff for the scene. And then George said he wanted to make this science fiction film, and I was quite honest because I love science fiction literature. I read a lot, and I was always, you know, I was always veering towards the real and the, you know, the Frank Herberts and the Arthur C. Clarkes and things like that. I have to say, fairly unique in England at the time, because any dinner party, I'd say, "Oh, I'm reading science fiction. I'm reading June." "Oh, it's not Shakespeare, is it?" That was the put down I got
Right.
every time. So you know, I never cared.
Yeah.
And so I said, "Look, George, I you know, Flash Gordon." I said, "It's fine. I love the graphic novels, but I couldn't connect to it, and I couldn't connect to any science fiction film ever. I just said they don't look real to me. It should be an old car in a garage or an old spaceship dripping oil, you know."
Right.
Little did I know until I read the script, I was actually describing the Millennium Falcon where you're sitting. And
Yeah.
so that was it. We had dinner that night with George, and then I was told to be in London on August the 1st to start work. And the first surprise was in 20th Century Fox with Peter Beale, who said, "Well, there's only $4 million to make this whole movie." We read the script and thought, how on earth are we going to do this? And most people turned it down. You know, they were very traditional at the time, art departments. There wasn't. I'd kind of grown up from my beginnings on Oliver and doing TV series like Randall and Hopkirk Deceased and things like that. I'd got a very alternative attitude to movies, and I spent half my time in we had art cinemas all over London at the time, and I was constantly in them watching. One of my favorites was Alphaville,
Yep.
which Jean-Luc Godard had made on the streets of Paris, and he turned Paris into a science fiction city with a little Bolex and hardly any crew. I only found out later, I think David West Reynolds told me, that George has that poster of Alphaville. It's one of the few he's got in the ranch. So there's connections that kind of come without us having to talk about it, George and I. Anyway, I kind of looked at it and thought, well, this is a dream project for me. And as soon as I read the script, because I was always very embedded with myth, and I read a lot and was doing a lot of alternative work, all sorts of things. And I'd done a few kind of strange science fiction films like Final Program. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but
I have not. I would love to.
it's a Michael Moorcock book about a detective who fires a needle gun and he lives on McVitie chocolate biscuits. That's all he eats.
well, don't worry. That's Kyle's Friday night coming up this week. So you
that probably.
Well,
I will find it.
yes.
Well, funny enough, the British industry runs on McVitie chocolate biscuits. So when I was on location, I'd often ask, "Do you want me to bring anything?" And I was going down. They said, "Oh, can you bring the McVitie's?"
Nice.
Anyway, he was a young kind of alternative designer, Philip Harrison, who I did 3 films with, and it's quite an interesting movie actually. And so I thought, you know, what am I going to do? John Barry quite rightly analyzed everything and said, first of all, if you don't have R2-D2 working, George hasn't got a movie. We can't make it. And there was no CGI at the time. Radio control was really primitive. And the only reference we had actually was Daleks. who
Mm, yeah.
They put people inside and moved it around.
Hmm.
So, and people believed them. I did. I was a kid. I was frightened, and they
Right.
had a toilet plunger for a.
But they're still scary.
They
Yeah.
are. Their voice is so it's intimidating when you hear it. Like,
Yeah.
exterminate. It's great.
And that was a toilet plunger on the front for a weapon.
Like, yeah. It's amazing how they can instill fear.
Absolutely. So John Barry put us, Les and I, onto trying to make that, and George had found Kenny Baker, who was 3'8", and the only thing George turned up with was 6 paintings by Ralph McQuarrie. And as you see in the book and in the documentary I'm just finishing, he's the unsung hero of Star Wars. I mean, everything is in those paintings except for one thing, the lightsaber. But we'll come to that later.
Yeah.
It kind of gave us the clue, and he was 3'8", and we'd measured out R2-D2 from that Ralph McQuarrie painting of the two of them in the desert with Tatooine in the background. And John Barry decided, he designed Little Prince for Stanley Donen, and because he couldn't afford to do what was in the script, he then kind of recommended to George that he go with him to Tunisia and take a look, because it was like an alien landscape, but real.
Yeah.
And so we built the first R2-D2. So what happened, we arrived in August. There's no money. Fox had not committed. They were hounding Gary Kurtz to get the budget down to the 4. So Robert Watts got a tiny studio in London, and there was just Robert Watts, myself, Les Dilly, and John Barry, and George and Gary. That was it. I hired Monty Python's carpenter, who I'd worked with, who built their special effects. So Bill A1 is very funny, a very good sense of humor, but he also, when you look at no money, you look at the early Python films. I always said the one with Holy Grail, they couldn't even afford horses in it. They had coconut shells banging together. And so Bill had some wood at home, because we asked Robert Watts, can we have a bit of money? We got to build that, and we've got to build a mock-up land speeder. And he said, no, sorry, there's none. So Bill had the wood at home, and he scrounged around the studios where Ken Russell made a film, found some bits of timber, and built that R2-D2, the wooden mock-up one, which is in the book. And then he said, I can't make the top. So I scrounged around. In the back was a lighting company, Lee, and I found in a scrap heap this top, and I thought, wow, that's exactly going to fit. So I took that. Bill cut out all the stuff inside of it, and that fitted. And at the same time, I got some, I thought, you know what, I better make it look a bit better for when George comes back. So I got some army surplus stuff that I was given. And there's a Dakota light from a passenger light that's stuck in there. These things are still there. Yeah. And there was George wanted a knife and fork, he called it, on the front, which was the 2 little arms like that. So
right.
Bill, again, he said, I can't do that. So he sent me home with a penknife and a bit of balsa wood, and I carved that at home. That fitted.
Now, Roger, people that are unfamiliar with your book, and so the original drawings that you were given or paintings, were they exactly like the R2-D2 we see in the movie, or were they larger, smaller? What did you have to go off of?
Nothing. That photograph of them in the desert, and
it's hardly anything. Yeah, it's pretty.
That was it. So there is actually, I think it's in the book, but I've got it in the documentary I've done. I found one of the sketches, which I believe George roughed out on a bit of old paper for Bill. No, that was it. There was nothing to go on. apart from our own ingenuity and whatever Ralph had painted.
Hmm.
But George's entire career is built on hiring people who have enough experience to do the job, but not too experienced, where we say, no, Gov, sorry, no, that's not how we do things. We have to do it like this, in which
Right.
case Star Wars would never have been made.
Sure.
And he wrote stuff, gave it to people, and figured they'd figure out how to do it, which is what he did. There was no kind of, oh, I want it like this, do that. Gave us the drawings. There it was. Make it work. Kenny Baker, bless him, could not move. We made properly the legs. He couldn't move it. So Bill and I decided we got Kenny's boots and we stapled those in the bottom of the legs. And he couldn't even shuffle it. It kind of was wobbling. That was about it. And part of the junk that I bought, there was a fighter pilot's harness. So we stapled that inside, and then Kenny Baker wore it like a rucksack. He put R2-D2 on, the wooden one. And George and Gary were there, and he took 3 steps forwards before falling over. We could hear him going, get me out, I'm falling over. But that was the most auspicious moment on Star Wars, because we knew we had a movie.
Yeah. Because those movements are still there. I mean, he does some of the wobbling and things like that in those scenes.
Yeah. He can turn the head and he can wobble and do all of that, but he can actually move it. So, you know, I'm jumping forwards, but on the 3-legged mode, when we went to Tunisia, John Barry called Les and I into the office one day and shut the door, and we thought, what's going to happen? And he said, listen, I'm very worried about John Steers bragging about his radio control and how well it's going to work. He said, because you know it never works. I want you to build a lightweight fiberglass one you can pull along. Don't tell anyone, get it made and get it ready and put it on the truck, which is what we did. And yes, he had a vision of the future. On the first day of shooting was Uncle Owen with Luke buying the robots by the Sandcrawler. First shot was R2-D2. Down he comes, bang, over he goes, falls over. John Steers, bless him, he'd always use this excuse in London. He said, it's the blooming taxis. They're upsetting my radio control signals. We were 3 miles in the desert. The nearest town, no, there was one taxi, I think, that we could use. Most of the taxis were donkeys or camels. That was it. So
the donkeys are doing.
So that was, Gary Kurtz said, get the monofilament one out. So Les didn't know what monofilament was, because it's an American expression. I said, he means the fishing wire.
Right.
So we got our fishing wire one. And in fact, most of the scenes in 3-legged mode, unless it was a certain easy point, most of them are done with us pulling R2-D2 around on fishing wire. Anyway, that's his story. But
and honestly, before I read that in your book, I don't think I realized that he had been pulled along by fishing wires. I'd always assumed it was the radio control. So that's awesome.
we laid down the grip boards and put a bit of sand on the edge of it, and wherever it was shot, and on film it doesn't show up fishing wire. They didn't even have to remove it. No, it worked occasionally, but most of it was like that.
I think you talked about it in the book. What was John's reaction after you built one and he didn't know it? Oh, he was ready with his radio control and you had your fiberglass one?
Yeah. Well, it was the only thing he could do because it didn't work. And then when the R2 unit with the head explodes, that was then on that first day, they packed the head with electronics trying to make the radio control work. And then I remember I was there and George and Gary were saying, well, how's it going to blow up the head? And they were long faces. So Les and we quickly repainted our mock-up one and put the other head on, which they stripped out, and we pulled that along like that. So that one worked. In fact, if you look at that scene, the whole scene there, it's actually all about R2D2. C3PO, it's important, but it's all about R2D2 because he's the one carrying the message. The whole thing, the structure of the movie, it rests on R2D2, you know, finding Obi-Wan, all of that. He's actually not very much in it. George is such a kind of experienced, concise editor. He knew there was enough. If it came before it fell over, he could just about cut it together. And look at the scene carefully, and you'll see he's not that much in it.
It's true.
So yeah, we finally got into EMI, and that was on the 6th of January, when they finally triggered the movie, Fox, and said, okay, you could go and make it. We were shooting in March,
Right,
which is insane for that size of a science fiction film. And
right.
so again, John kind of was designing the sets, and he'd very carefully gone. He'd gone to meet right after Mexico. Instead of going to London, he went up to meet George and Ralph McQuarrie and explained to them how to do matte paintings, because they'd never done it before, and how he could build half the Millennium Falcon. He explained all of that. It's another funny story here, but Ralph McQuarrie went back to Los Angeles and thought, oh, well, I need a glass panel. I have to paint it on glass. So he took the shower door off. He didn't have one. Painted it on the shower door, and he drove it on his old car strapped on the top. This is a glass.
Wow.
All the way back up to San Francisco.
Wow.
It gives you a kind of example of how this film was made.
Very guerrilla filmmaking, you know, it's just
yeah, it was just a group of dedicated people, really.
Yeah.
Right. Man was showering naked that night, apparently. So
yeah, exactly.
The floor was soaked.
Yeah, exactly.
dedicated.
Yeah.
Well, one of the fascinating things about the book too is how you explain the dressing of the interior of the Millennium Falcon, and a lot of the exteriors of things as well. Is like you guys would just basically cannibalize airplane scrap and just kind of make it work.
Well, it's funny. I always cite it. And I had a Mustang in those days because I loved the Mustangs, and it was pretty unusual in London. It was left-hand drive, but it shows my thinking, really. And I was driving around London thinking, what am I going to do? You know, we have to create. I don't have time, and I don't have the money to build all this dressing. And I'd been in submarines, and I'd seen B-52 bombers and wanted that look. And buying the bits of scrap, I thought, you know what, if I got airplane scrap, parts of it, maybe I could do it like that. And I think because George had made THX, he understood, because I think any other American director, particularly in England, if I'd gone and said, look, I'm thinking I'm going to get some old airplane scrap and make the sets out of it, they'd have shown me the door. But they all said, well, try it. And so first thing they did when I moved into EMI Studios, Robert Watts got a little 4-seater airplane and a pilot to take us around 3 airfields where we'd found they had mountains of scrap. No one wanted it. See, it's very lightweight, so it was sold by weight metal. Honestly, the first one I came to, I just thought I'd hit heaven. I bought, I think, must have been 8 Rolls-Royce Derwent engines and mountains of scrap, and it cost like $50, $100. It was nothing. And we went around all 3 airfields and bought as much as I could. I could get all the inside planes are still the same, where they heat the food. They're little metal kind of cabinets that slide in and out. I bought huge numbers of those, landing gear, cockpit stuff, anything I could get my hands on, and came back. And, you know, there's a few things I'll explain how the thinking was, because the crew honestly did not understand what we were doing. Even Les Dilly, who was drawing it up, he's very ill now, but he always says we didn't know what this film was about, just no idea.
Yeah.
And they all thought it was terrible. They thought it was children's fantasy.
Well, I will say, just from looking behind Kyle, and that's what the feeling gives you when you look at the Millennium Falcon, is all the exposed wiring, exposed, exhaust, things like that. So
It's very raw.
in a lot of science fiction movies, generally Star Trek, whatnot, everything is finished on the inside. So if there was
Clean.
ever to be somebody that had to work on something, they'd have to remove a panel to do it and then work on the wiring. Whereas in Star Wars, a lot of it's in the exposed, and it's very reminiscent. I was in the military and we flew on C-130s a lot. And it was very unsettling to someone that flew on the plane that you would see the exposed wiring and everything hanging out in the open as you flew. But generally, a lot of times it's there, so there's no time lost to make an adjustment if you need to or fix something. So, and you see in Star Wars, a lot of the insides of the vehicles have that militaristic look that you've done.
Yeah, well, it's, I look at Russian Sputnik things that went up in space, and the Apollo that came afterwards. It's AM1. There's a prime of space, and I went down on. There's a submarine in Long Branch. I remember going down at the company I was working for. He was making a commercial, so I went down and had a look inside it, and I thought this is what it will be like, because there isn't the money to build these beautiful lounge-like living rooms that they fly in Star Trek. It was mainly because I never believed those things, and nor did the audience ever.
Right.
So I thought, no, and I did have a kind of engineering propensity somehow. I think my father bought the first motorbike he bought for 2 6 pence, which is I think $5. It was a hand change Enfield with a gear lever on it, and made me strip it down and make it work. And so I got a kind of, and he was a frustrated engineer, so I kind of had that side. And it was a leap of faith, I have to say, because I came up with this idea. I didn't know it would work, and most of the crew, the first day, actually, and I'll go back, the first day we arrived from Lee Studios. So during that time we were building R2-D2 and everything. I thought my biggest peeve was sci-fi weapons, because they're even worse. They were bleeping and they didn't look real. So I didn't tell anyone. I went on my own to Baptist, the gun hire place. They were friends of mine, and the owner was, and built a stormtrooper's blaster out of a submachine gun, a Sterling, which I would have used as it was. I always thought these are sci-fi weapons, they're amazing. But I stuck the T-strip around it and found these gun sights that were in boxes that weren't being used. And then George's, the spaghetti Western idea, and Han Solo being a cowboy, really a space cowboy. And I found that Mauser, which to me was like, wow, this is it. It wouldn't stock and all of this. So again, I changed it, and I got those two, and I thought these are really cool, and they can fire. We could fire them on set, so you get the flame and a bit of smoke. And it was that point I called John Barry and said, listen, this is what I've done. You better get George to come over. Because this was the point where, right at the beginning, we were making R2-D2, but this was really the foundation of a look for Star Wars and my ideas. So it was either get fired or George liked it, and George loved the idea of them, and he stayed with me, and we made Princess Leia's gun together, sticking super glue pieces on it, stuff. So by then, and during that 3 or 4 months, I'd found the bowcaster, which Ralph McQuarrie had drawn Chewbacca with a blaster. And when I saw the bowcaster with those balls on the end, I thought, wow, this is a weapon for a Wookiee. And again, George loved it. And I created most of the weapons at that time in there. So the first AD, the big prop on the floor, the whole gang of people came and they said, put what you've done so far out and then we can see what you've done. Well, they took one look. He picked up the Sterling submachine gun, which was my blaster, literally threw it at me and said, this is crap. We're doing a major science fiction film for an American director. And they all went off to get me fired on the spot. That's the atmosphere when I came in.
Yeah. But it's like, I think, yeah, like you mentioned this in your book, like you think of what you saw before, it was always like those silver guns that are like rounded and like
horrible.
very clean and look,
and they go beep, 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 beep.
Right. And you made it from a real gun, so you just
Yeah.
should have shot that guy and set the tone for the rest of it.
Exactly.
I mean,
but I think, I mean, you just iconically changed what sci-fi was seen in people's eyes. Like it just, the way the weapons looked, the interiors of the ships, as we've mentioned, all that stuff really just helped just completely give people a new look at what sci-fi could be. And that's what carried in through the 80s and 90s and even today. I mean, the people are still using that style.
Yeah, it did change everything. And, it was a dream of mine to look at like that, but we didn't have the money to do it. There wasn't one single prop, anything that I could put into the studios in the usual way and have it drawn up and then made in the workshops. I couldn't do one thing like that. There just wasn't the time.
Well, let me ask you this. If you felt like, say they had an unlimited budget, a huge budget, do you think you would have made the movie better or worse?
No, I wouldn't have made it better. I mean, I think I would have stuck to my guns with the idea, but I would have been fired within days.
Yeah.
Because that's not what we do, And I think it's I write about this in the book. Frank Bruton was a gigantic prop master. He did Stanley Kubrick's movies. He did David Lean's movies. He was a wonderful man. He did move. Stanley Kubrick got a death threat when they were making the film in Ireland, the huge one. I'll think of the name in a minute.
Oh.
And
was it from that time era, like after Shining or before Shining?
Before, way before.
Okay.
It's the big one with.
Is it the big red one? Is it?
No, it's the huge period film with. Oh God, it'll come back. Sorry. Anyway, it's a massive period film set in I guess the 18th century. Ryan's Daughter.
Okay. Yep.
Frank Bruton, Kubrick got a bomb threat in Ireland. He moved an entire army of like 700 crew to South Africa within a weekend. That was who Frank was, right? Mm. And so he asked me, we were so young, George and I and everybody, he said, okay, boy, what do you want? He called me boy always. And I said, clear out your prop room. There's no curtains, there's no tables and chairs, there's nothing like that. I'm going to bring in all this scrap. And he said, okay, boy. I was standing there. He came to watch. It's this, I don't know if it was a 16-wheeler trailer, backed in, roped on it were airplane junk. There were jet engines roped on the top and everything. He never looked at me. I just heard this voice saying, you're mad, boy. And I'm thinking, oh God, is this going to work? But bless him, he was the one person who really supported. And he said, tease on in my office, boy, 5 minutes, you tell me what you want. So I said, I need tools. I need to break down jet engines. And if you look, even behind you, there's 3 of everything or 2 of everything, airplanes, spaceships, whatever. Mm. If things go wrong, there's an alternative one that you can use. So there's a structure. So I had to break everything down and put it into units. And we started dressing with it, just sticking it in. And the first thing that we actually completed was the cockpit.
Hmm.
And John Barry had hired, he was an art director on 2001. And he'd hired him because there's the Death Star, which is the other version of what we were doing. That's the kind of cold imperial look. And we were the dusty Tatooine rough look. And so that was being built like that. And I kept going down and telling him that when he was doing it, I'm going to come and mess this up for me, mess this up. And he kind of handed it over to me, wondering what I was going to do. And I'd found fighter pilot seats we'd bought in. They were in the scrap, and I put those in, and I started to dress bits and pieces in it like that. And I was doing the hold area, which you're sitting in at the same time. Now, this thing was eating up scrap. I was getting more truckloads of it coming in. We found, my buyer said, come with me. We're going down into south of England. There was a field. There were 5 or 6 brand new, massive transporters that they built for the RAF, and the RAF decided they didn't want them. And I said, what are you going to do? He said, I know, we're just going to cut them up. So we cut up loads of pieces of it, took masses of it, because I was loading it into that set and it looked terrible. And I was praying that no one would come and look at it. But there's that magic day where suddenly, and I was adding in, if we kind of got it all in there, then we were adding little bits of stickers of numbers, because everything has a number, because there's a part you need to know if it's gone wrong, and put in oil, and we were dressing it down and aging it, sticking in air parts. I then watched people come on this set, and I watched their eyes go wide open, and they were suddenly looking at a real spaceship. They didn't understand, and I thought, oh, this has worked. George obviously liked them, and he was seeing his kind of vision before him unfolding. So, at a certain point of time, the draftsman who had decided I wasn't quite as mad as they thought I was would go down to my junk piles. And if you look at the cantina, John Barry had them go and pick out, and all of that is either my tubing that was PVC drain pipe or water piping, and those are, I think, Rolls-Royce cowling pieces that they lacquered in gold to make up the whole thing was made out of it. So by now they were going down, picking the pieces and putting them into drawings. So they were doing it that way after that. It was, I loved what I was doing, I have to say, and so did John Barry. And there's an interview with George and Christopher Nolan. It's on YouTube if you watch now. And George never says anything, as you know. There's nothing about him ever in the press, nothing. But he did at one point, talking about making Star Wars, said, Christopher, there were only 5 people who stood right by my side and helped me on Star Wars, and that was the art department, which was John Barry and myself and Les and Norman. We were treated appallingly, as was George, throughout the whole making of it. And it got made because the British crews, they do work. If they've got a job, they'll do it. They can moan and complain and do whatever they like, but they'll get on and do it. So we got it made somehow. It was never easy.
But you could see the passion in what you guys did on the screen. I mean, it's right there, and it's lasted. This long.
Well, it's there's things like, I mean, the cockpit. It was my idea to put the dice in because George had put the dice in Ron Howard's car in American Graffiti, and they were very popular. Those huge fluffy ones in America.
Yep.
And I said, he's a gambler. We should do it. It's for good luck.
And look how much that's carried through. I mean,
that's gone right through to the end. Yeah.
Yep.
In the exterior of the cantina, I wanted to do it like a Western hitching post. So I got every kind of vehicle that wasn't used, anything that was in the South. I got everything brought back and made a kind of hitching post idea. The problem, that square originally was dusty. It was just beautiful. And all John did was add some domes extra on the top to match the ones that were there. And we made the entrance. But there was an olive tree right there. And it was completely spoiling this look. These are poor farmers, and we couldn't cut it down. So John drew that crashed spaceship, which was literally as big as a Boeing 747.
Yeah, which is
and
amazing.
Again, they were all looking at me mad because we had to truck everything to Tunisia. Everything went in trucks for about 5 countries. So one of them I was loading with airplane junk and scrap. I actually took the Death Star. We persuaded John Barry to buy a machine that could print almost like PVC now. It could print out, and it saved his budget because he printed out panels for the Death Star and they just stapled them up. So I took loads of those down. I got up on a ladder on the crashed spaceship, stapled them on, got a blowtorch and aged it down, and then we got the painters to age it with rusty paint and stuff, and it looked incredibly real. Well, if you look at every Star Wars movie since, the world is crashed spaceships. I mean, even Rey lives in one and plunges. There's so many things that have gone on from kind of what we did. You know, the bones in the desert behind R2D2 and C3PO.
Yeah.
John had drawn those on a drawing on the dunes, and it was a great idea because it gives you a kind of history to this planet. It gives it a bit of. I couldn't afford that, and I told them, I said, "There's no way." And Frank Bruton one day told me to go in the attic above the pop room because he said, "I need more space, so I'm emptying it. I'm throwing everything out. Everything's getting binned." He gave me a torch and said, "Go and have a look." There was this full-size dinosaur skeleton fiberglass, and I got it down, put it in the parking lot, and that was it. That went on there, and
there you go.
And that became the Crate Dragon.
And that was from a Disney film, right? One of our dinosaurs is missing.
Exactly that. Yeah.
Which is how lucky. How lucky is that?
Irony.
But, right. I thought you were going to tell me you went to a slaughterhouse and found the carcass of a cow and brought that in and jammed it in the sand.
No, we did that for Alien. No, and then at the end of it, Robert Watts came to me and said, "Oh, leave that skeleton there. I can't afford to take it back." And I said, "Are you sure?" And he said, "Yeah, leave it. It's in the desert. No one's going to find it."
Yeah.
So that became a huge kind of story.
Like everybody's going to find that.
Yeah, I was going to say that might mess up some of the locals. You know what I mean? You get the,
They just, to them, when David West Reynolds found it, when he went back years later to map out every location we'd done, took him 5 days. And because there was no belief in Star Wars, everything that we did was binned after the first one. So Rick McCallum, we had to go back on Phantom Menace. There was no records anywhere of where we shot. Nothing. It was all gone. And David West Reynolds, being an explorer, an archaeologist kind of explorer, thought one day, these sets should be part of history. People should go and be able to visit them. So on his own money, he got a crew and he went. And because he's an archaeologist, he took bits of the film and he found out every single location. And more than that, he found the angle of every single shot because that's how they do it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
5 days, the day he gave up, because nobody knew, the only instruction he got, he called Robert Watts and said, "Do you remember where that was shooting?" And Robert Watts said, "Well, when you leave Tozeur or Nefta, you go towards Algeria on the left. If you turn left somewhere, now this is like
Very precise.
250,000 acres of
Left at
salt
that rock.
lakes.
Yeah.
And he gave up, and as he gave up, literally a group of camel, they were nomads, came by, and he just went across and said, "Skeleton, skeleton," and the young boy said, "Ah, skeleton, skeleton," and the boy led them 3-hour walk. He led them to the bones.
Oh, no kidding.
Oh,
Incredible.
There's some of them now in Rancho Obi-Wan. Some collector went and got a load of them, and then David has some, and Rick McCullum got some when he went back and found some. So there's a lot of stories.
Yeah. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Yeah. That's incredibly awesome, though. I mean, just so cool. But and one of the, I want to talk a little about your first directorial debut,
Yes.
which appeared before The Empire Strikes Back.
And you're
in
sitting in
several
front of
countries.
my
Yes, which is awesome. Black Angel.
right.
That short, because you had transitioned from set decorating into directing.
Well, I
And
was art directing. I went on to art direct and did a film in Suffolk, Aikenfield, a few others. I was designing Life of Brian with Terry Gilliam. That collapsed. So after Star Wars, I was art directing the final remake of Beau Geste to Marty Feldman, and then Life of Brian, which I was designing by then. And then that collapsed, and I went on to Alien, and Ridley put me as the art director in charge of the entire look of the Nostromo, because he wanted a space truck version of what the Millennium Falcon was.
he absolutely did that.
So I decided, because I saw people gave in as soon as you got offered a job, and I decided to go back to film school, a Beaconsfield National Film School, and I was trying to had somewhere to go every day, and I was learning editing and lighting and doing a lot of stuff, working with actors, doing all sorts of stuff. And I thought, what am I going to do? I have to have to kind of explore the world of mythology and King Arthur, which was one of my favorites, and also Kurosawa, who, if anyone was my mentor, it was Kurosawa. I just hero worshipped everything he did. And as he was George's mentor,
Yes.
These are connections that we only found out later. And so I wrote it. I was, Bill Rowe was a sound mixer. He was the #1 in the world at the time. EMI Studios in England, in London. They did Kubrick's movies. They did huge movies, and he was the best. So Ridley was there doing Alien. I'd called him and said, could I come and sit in? Because there's no better way to learn than with the master, And Sandy Lieberson, the head of Fox, came in and asked me what I was doing. And so I said, well, I've written this short film, but I can't afford to make it. And he said, oh, can you send it to me? So I did. And he called me the next day and said, listen, there's an 80's fund in Britain at the time. They put up £25,000 for a young filmmaker to make a movie if a producer would say that it would be released with his film being released in cinemas. And George was pretty upset with Fox for the film they put with the first Star Wars. It was alienating his audience, he said. So he said, there's that 80's fund, why don't you have one made? Well, they'd chosen about 5, I think, and Sandy said to me, well, we're not sure about them, but we have to give them in. We've only got till Friday. Would you mind if I sent this script to George? And so, of course, I said, no, of course not. I didn't think anything of it. And then 2 days later, I got a call saying, right, you're going to make your film. George has given strict instructions for leave you alone. You're to make it. Nobody in Fox, no executives that go in and fix it, do anything. He's the first one to screen it and let him go and make it, which was kind of a way George is anyway, and the way they all are and the way they work. And it was a kind of thank you for Star Wars as well. So I had a crew of 9 people. I could only afford 3 rolls of film, but they gave me all the short ends from Empire Strikes Back. Any film left over, they gave me.
Which is so that's such a great opportunity to be able to get that too. How wonderful
Yeah.
of him.
And the behind you there is my Black Angel. And that I got the costume designer said he would help me, who did all of the Monty Python films. And again, he was used to doing it for nothing. And he said, I'm going to help you. Don't worry about that. I don't need paying. I'm just going to help you do it. So he and I made that. We got a used secondhand diving suit and got some bits of rubber, and then we got some stringy rubber stuff, and we made it up, the Black Angel, on the spot. I could only afford 2 trained horses. That was it. And then that I got the editor, who was an experienced friend of mine. We put it all together, and he said it's got to be 25 minutes, and it's too short. And so he suggested step printing at the time. That's the only way you could slow down, was you repeated the negative. You did it twice, 3, 4, 5, or 6 times, and he did all of those. And we chose the I think it was about 4 or 5 times, and that made up my fight. And it was, I didn't have a choreographer. I had a friend of mine doing it, and we had, I often had one shot I could do. I couldn't even do take 2. I had one shot, and it was pouring with rain, and it wasn't looking that good. And we had spray cobweb cans. I was spraying it in the air all around him, doing stuff like this. So George liked that. He actually went back on Empire and slowed down the Yoda fight in the cave. He liked the step printing idea, so that got so I got, and then Bill Rowe, I was friends with anyway, because I spent a lot of my career in EMI Studios, and I knew Bill very well, the sound mixer. And he said, Roger, you bring your film to me. And I said, I can't afford you, Bill, come on. So he said, just show it to me. And I shot it in CinemaScope, widescreen. And my idea, like Kurosawa used Mount Fuji, I'd never seen Scotland filmed by anybody, this mystical beauty. And I took a huge risk at the end of summer, right as winter was coming, when the skies are unbelievable. There's veins of light coming in. There's kind of the mood, and it's mystical. So I used that as part of the drama. And Bill said, I'm sorry, you've got to do a sound mix. I persuaded a film student who was there to study to do the music, and I spent hours and hours with him, playing in Vangelis and all different people that I'd found who weren't known then. And Bill said, well, have you got anything in the budget? And I said, well, I have £1,000, which was my salary. And I said, if I give you that, would you do it? And he said, yes, I'll do it for £1,000. So he did the mix for me, which was a major part of the kind of dream, because I made the film. Like, another favorite of mine was Tarkovsky, and I loved his films, and every film he made connected to the subconscious, not the conscious part. You had to let go when you watched it. And I thought, if I do that, I can get away with this kind of mystic dream. So so it was scary the first time. It went out in about 480 prints with Empire Strikes Back everywhere, and I was getting letters from all over the country saying, wow, you've touched my soul, and people were praising me. The major big producers in England were all putting me down, saying, go back to art directing. You can't do that. It started this kind of whole, I guess it's where my career went after that. And I thought, well, I'm used to it on Star Wars anyway. And
right. You get a lot of the backlash, and you're like, you know what?
Well,
then push through.
John Borman was just starting to make Excalibur. So I got invited with my DP, Roger Pratt. This was the first time he'd made How Does a Washing Machine Work? He'd never DP'd anything before, but I recognized a talent like George did with us. I saw a talent in him. And on the first shot we ever did, I saw him puzzling, looking at his light meter in Scotland. And I said, "What's up?" And he said, "I get no reading, but look through camera, it's stunning." So he threw the light meter over his shoulder and said, "Right, we're just going to do it now by feel."
Yeah.
There you go.
And wow, it looks amazing.
Well,
I mean,
we were taken down went to see John, and we were in Theatre 7 in Pinewood Studios, which is a beautiful screening room. His entire crew was there, and I think I was kind of hiding under a table, and then Roger, I think he was being ill outside, and I said, "John, we made this with no money, with short ends and everything." He said, "Roger, that's what I want. I want my crew to see it. This is what I want Excalibur to be like." And he even asked me, "Would you mind, because I liked your Underwater, I'm going to put a homage to that. I wanted a piece in Excalibur like that." And I said, "John, you're going to have a massive crew." I had 9 people and 1 camper van. You're going to have toilets and rest, and food, everything. But and it influenced Highlander, who used my location as well.
Sure, yeah, that was all beautiful.
They are amazing. Yeah, the landscape is, I mean, when you watch it, and I was looking, I'm like, you look at it and like, this is a painting. It's got to be. It just has to be. And then all of a sudden you see something moving and fluttering in the back. I'm like, why? It just, yeah, every scene was just more and more cool, and the light coming through and the landscape as that backdrop. But you can see that, and it's got to be a really great feeling. I mean, George taking a piece to use for Empire Strikes Back, Highlander, Excalibur, that here, you're nervous about this piece and you made it very scrappy with the camper van and a small crew, and they're taking it and saying, "I want to take a piece of that," and wanting to share that so that you continue on with those pieces of other films, which I think that's really...
Yeah, it's interesting history, because then to answer the major producing critics in England, who were the major heads of the film industry, all of them, we'd found this young producer wannabe at the film school, and Paramount, the head of Paramount in England, asked me and said, "Look, we really liked your film. The ED fund is finished, it's over, there's one left, and they gave it to us, and I want you to make the movie." And I thought, right, I'm going to answer all these people. So we found this book called Dollar Bottom, and it was written by James Kennaway, a very famous Scottish writer who wrote Tunes of Glory. And his widow had kept this story and wouldn't let anyone have it. Television had hounded her. And this young producer had contacted her, and she said, "Come and tell me how you do it." So I had to go. He said, "You go on your own. You go and convince her." I had to go to London and meet with her. And I told her, "Look, the book, I'm going to use all the dialogue from the book. I'm going to use exactly what's there. We have to make it work within 25 minutes. And they've promised me it's going to go out with ordinary people in cinemas." And she gave us the rights to do it. I convinced her. And it won an Academy Award for Best Dramatic Short Film. The major producer of England called me after and said, "Well, you can direct after all." So I thought, okay. But Black Angel has another story, because I kind of forgot about it. I got on from them, and I was still a bit stung by all the criticism. And I kept getting Peter Briggs, who wrote Hellboy, the first one. He was constantly phoning me, citing the dialogue and saying, I remember this film, we got to see it, And eventually I found out I was directing Nostradamus in Romania, and I was signed by Boss Films to make commercials. Boss Film were doing all the effects for Blade Runner and huge films. and I was directing TV commercials for them. He went belly up when I was in darkest Romania, where there was no phones. We were there right just as the revolution had finished.
Yeah.
And they binned everything, including my negative and my print. And then, George had a copy himself. The archivists, they searched for a year for me. They could not find that copy. And I thought, you know what? The universe is telling me something. Let it rest now. People remember it. That's it, right?
Right.
I got a call one day about 10, 12 years ago saying, are you Roger Christian? I said, yes. And he said, did you make a film called Black Angel? And I said, yes. And he said, who did you make it for? And I said, it was my company called Painted Lady. He said, I've got your negative.
Oh my, yeah.
I said, what? And he's the archivist at Universal Studios.
Ah.
And I figured out later what happened. Rank Studios were the main, so I can't imagine what negatives are still there. They kept all of their negatives in World War II bunkers in the country in England because they were a perfect temperature.
Right.
Rank Studios went bankrupt. So I think they called around, and then Universal must have said, oh, we got tons of room here, and everything got shipped to them. So I was B. I was early on. He was going through A, B to get the negatives out of there. Now, at the same time, Wired magazine had approached me and said, we're doing articles called Forgotten Relics. And they said, your film, we know, it was a major influence on Excalibur. It was on Highlander and a few other things that they said it's got a place in history. Do you mind if we do an article? So they did an article on it. Well, blow me, a few weeks later, another phone call came from two people in San Francisco who were restoring movies, and they did some of Star Wars. They were that good, you know, they're top end. They said, listen, we want to restore your movie because we've read all about it and its place in history. And I said, well, that's great because they just found the negative, but I can't afford to do that at the moment. I knew what it would entail. They said, no, it's a gift. We want to do it for you.
Oh.
So
it
they
made that much of an impact.
They restored, I didn't touch the sound, they restored it, the first screening ever in America, because it was never tied to a movie in America, because you didn't have shorts there, only in Europe and Japan and places like Australia. There were programs. They put it into the Mill Valley Festival as the closing film. So I decided to go, and a young guy called me up from Scotland, and he said, listen, I just read about this film and you're going to show it in the Mill Valley in America. He said, would you mind if I come? And I said, no, it's why is this call? And he said, I was 5 years old. He said, my father took me to see Empire Strikes Back. And I saw this film that has gone into my head. It's in my DNA and I couldn't get it out. And I don't know what it was. I didn't know if I dreamt it. It had such a powerful impact on me. And I think it's your film. So he came, and he came with an offer. And he said, if you'll do it, I'll drive you around. I've got 4 cinemas in Scotland because they feel they owe you. And they own you because you were the first one to put Scotland like this, film it like that. And the second film, Dollar Bottom, I shot in Edinburgh, and it got an Academy Award, which was the first Academy Award Scotland had ever got. So he said they want to put it in the Glasgow Film Festival to open there, and then we'll go to 3 other cinemas around Scotland. You're going to meet the kids who you had as the plague victims. They all want to come.
Wow. That's awesome.
So I said, okay. So the screening at Glasgow, they had it in a 100-seater cinema. Well, by the time it screened, it was a 400-seater. So many people had bought tickets.
Wow.
And BBC Online, BBC Scotland, he did an article on it, and it went viral. woomph, in 500,000 hits. So in those days, this was some
Wow.
time back, in a week. And Esquire magazine did an article, and the LA Times did, and it went viral. I happened to be down in London there was a horse racing film that the producer of Nostradamus and I were trying to do. And the head of their development came in. He said, Roger, forget all of this horse racing. Look, what is this Black Angel? We need to do science fiction, fantasy with you. This is what you should be doing now.
Mhm.
What's this Black Angel? And I told him, and he said, right, get writing. We're going to make that. It's taken like 12 years of trying to get this thing made independently. I finally got the money. I've been offered it now. We will
excellent.
be going. But here's what happens. This is like these stories that go on. So at the Glasgow Film Festival afterwards, they had a Q&A that was a huge kind of where we shot and doing all of this. And then this woman stood up and she said, could I say something? And I said, sure, yes. She explained who she was. She said, I was the original producer of Game of Thrones. And I don't know if you know, but the pilot was shot in Scotland. And your film was a heavy influence on it. And it was around where we shot. So I said, no, I didn't know all of this. So when it came to making this film again, I thought, oh, they own that world now, the winter look and everything. And I thought, I'm just going to look like I'm copying them. So I went back and I thought, you know what, my original story, there was a little line in it about coming back from the Holy Lands, which I can't use now, of course. It would be not possible anymore. You can't mention anything. But I thought, you know what, I'm going to go back and do what I did on Star Wars, because I'd shot in Morocco and I knew there were huge sets there that I can have. So I set it like a spaghetti Western ancient epic. And I'm doing the same independently with very small budget, which no one believes I can make the same big film out of it, but I can.
Yeah, I bet you can.
So that's been proven.
It's taken a long time, but there's 3 parts of it. So the first film I'm calling The Sword of Tyrus, but it's the Black Angel saga, and then the last film will be the Black Angel, the full-on battles and stuff. So then
Very nice.
That should be fantastic.
So that's a little history of that little film. That's kind of a legacy for me, I guess.
I'll tell you, after reading about it in the book, like all the stuff you did, all the, you know, the ways in which you made the shots work, I rewatched it right after reading it. And it was just like, wow, it definitely, you can see how much time and energy and effort and how much passion came out of that when you watch it. It's beautiful.
Well, John Rinsler was the head of literature at Lucasfilm, and he wrote all those beautiful making of Star Wars books and everything. He and I became great friends once, because I'm not in the archives. There's nothing about John Barry or I, nothing. Nobody knows what we did. That's why I did the book, and why I've now become very vocal about it. And I thought, you know, forced by David West Reynolds to do it. He said, sorry, it's a legacy. This film is going to be studied in universities. It's growing bigger and bigger. It's now the 4th generation. You're going to have to do it. No one else can do it. So that kind of has taken on a kind of life of its own now, to try to put all of this together for people and to see how it was done. And John Rinsler insisted, that last piece on Black Angel, he said, this is a testament to, it's like a mentorship for anybody making films or anything, or the first one. And so he insisted on keeping that in there, because the publisher cut everything out, how I came to that, where I came from, what I was doing, how I met. They said, no, you start with Star Wars and that's really all we want. But I thought, well, no one's written about Alien, I'm going to put that in there. And then I thought I'll put Black Angel in it.
Yeah. It's what's great too is that I remember reading about it or seeing pictures of Black Angel in like Starlog or Lucasfilm magazine. So there were so many years I was always curious about this film. And then when you finally were able to release it for everyone to see, so grateful for that, because then, you know, we were able to experience here in the US So it was.
Yeah, it has a little life of its own, you know, and I was deeply embarrassed about it. And it's interesting. See, when it was screened at Mill Valley, a group of students came up to me from the film students from the film. They were there at this one in San Francisco, and one of them was the head of the magazine. They came up to me straight after and said, "Can we interview you?" And I said, on one condition. They said, "What?" And I said, "I'm going to interview you now first." So I said, "Listen, you know, this is like 30 something, 5 years old. It's very slow paced. It's more like connecting to the subconscious. It's not a conscious film. You know, I would I do it the same now? Probably not, because the world has changed so much." So he said, "I know what you're going to say." And he said, "Let me answer you in one simple thing. If I had made this film now and put it in as my thesis, my professor would have said, 'Now cut it faster, do this, do that.'" And he said he would have been wrong. We really enjoyed, for once, just absorbing the landscape, absorbing the story. You're not having to explain everything. We're getting it. And it has a kind of, yeah, it's a dreamlike kind of quality to it. But the combination of the music, which is beautiful in it, Trevor Jones did a beautiful job with it, that is very evocative. So I thought, okay, then I'm going to let it go. I'll let it be now. It's funny how it all works.
Yeah, for sure.
And yeah, same thing with what Kyle said. It's like I didn't know that it existed until I read the book.
See,
and as I started to look at it, I'm like, I'm going to watch it. So I watched it, then finished reading that part in the book, and then went back and watched it again to do that. But I'm like, just to learn about everything and be able to watch it, I think I can truly say that I am bound to the Black Angel.
and the Black Angel behind you.
That's right. Yeah. So
if you look at the first Lord of the Rings, you'll see the influence it had on those
the ring race
that Peter Jackson did.
And us growing up as kids, and loving films and doing our own little small versions of things, of understanding, like, you use what you've got, and you try to figure out how to make a shot. How do you do it with whatever you've got that's right next to you to make it happen, and then go back and say, boy, if now I could go back and do it with the technology that we have, I would go back and change so many other things. But but still having that purity of the time, that's what and even to say to go back 35 years, I don't think that to me, it doesn't seem like you have to go back and think 35 years, watch it and truly appreciate it. And then I'm like, as I was watching it, because I knew there was a lot of Monty Python references and loving those films, I'm like, that castle, is that the same? Like, some of the castle shots, or like just the mist coming through, it just had something that was like comforting to all the films that we've, appreciated over the years, and that we and some of your influence was just really incredible to see kind of in the film too. That sparked a lot.
Absolutely.
It was a huge gamble, but I did it, so we got it done somehow, and it's living on. It's living.
Absolutely.
These things live. So
and I will say, learning about the props, like, it took years. Like, as a kid and growing up, we had no idea what the lightsabers were made out of, and then finding out with the research and the internet, and then knowing, oh, that's what they were. And then to read in the book and to know that you selected some of these props, and and that's kind of really where it came from.
Yeah, these there you go.
Yeah, this is the original Graflex too, and I found it early on, and I bought it right away, and I'm like, and I will keep this forever. But I saw the Graflex behind you as well, and that's what made me think about it.
Yeah. Well, the original ones, I've still got two of because in the documentary, I've gone back, I found David French, who was the manager at Brunnings in England, where we got all our camera gear from him, and I'd handmade Luke's binoculars out of 3 camera parts that I literally stuck together with super glue. That was the only one we had. And I thought I'd better make it look a bit like binoculars. So I went and bought 2 lenses for it, cheap old lenses that I stuck on the front. And I asked David French, I said, have you got anything? I've got to make this weapon for a sci-fi movie. And he suggested torches, and I said, no, John Steers, the special effects, tried that, and they looked terrible, and George rejected them. And he said, well, there's some boxes over there, go and have a look. And because he rented a lot of Graflex cameras because they were the standard press camera at the time in the 40s. So he rented a lot of them for movies. And there were a box, and I pulled it out, and there were 3 of those Graflex handles that were bolted onto the side where the flash bulb went into the what do you call it, the reflector. And so I took all 3 of them. I've had so many arguments and discussions over the years. Everyone's saying, "No, there was only ever one lightsaber made," and I made the first one. I made a second one because John Steers, I gave them the idea of the wooden dowel painted with front projection paint because I'd done it for art installations, and he put in a little motor that was off center, so it jiggled a bit, and it worked. And I made another spare one. And then I had David Whiteley because it was COVID, and I was doing everything through virtual studios. So I got David Whiteley, who made the beautiful Galaxy Britain built documentary for the BBC. He interviewed David, and he said, "David, what happened then?" He said, "Well, they called me and said, do you have any more of these Graflex handles?" And he said, I couldn't let them have too many. And they said, "Well, how many have you got?" And he said, "Well, I could let you have 30 of them." So 33 of those handles went to the set for us, between us and the special effects boys and everything. I've got 2 of those originals still. Awesome. I kept them. I loved them. They were just beautiful. And even now there's arguments going on. I put chrome tape around the Graflex lettering because I thought I can't have that. And everyone's even telling me I didn't do that now. And I did. And I looked at the one on hanging on Luke's belt, and you can see there is no lettering on it. And that same one I did hung on his belt. And then the only other time it's seen is when, and it's interesting looking back because of the documentary, I actually created animation scenes, not from the film, because when you look at Obi-Wan, George never focused on something like most science fiction. Oh, look at this weapon, look at that. Obi-Wan picks it up, gives it to Luke, he fires it up. You hardly see it. There's no emphasis on it. The emphasis is on Obi-Wan telling Luke it was his father's weapon, which is the correct way to do it. So I did my own animation sequences for it. And then it was only seen in the training ball scene. Right. So, that... I decided, and it was David West Reynolds and John Rinsler, they all said, "Roger, you had to create this." So it's now become apparently the most iconic prop in the history of cinema. And absolutely. So now I'm able to now go to all these events and tell people the stories, and I have people crying when they're holding it and everything. And I'm very, I think George gave the world a myth, a new legend for the cinema age. And George gave the world, and as you probably know, he made his films for 9 to 12-year-olds, and he's told me many times it's not my fault, adults like them as well. Right. But he's given the world something to believe in. Absolutely. And religions, whichever you follow, whatever you do, they're not connecting so well now to these new generations. And Star Wars is just growing and growing, and it gives the right message. So I'm hugely supportive of it. I'm hugely supportive of George, what he gave to the world. Absolutely. There's always naysayers and everything, but we just ignore it. I ignore it. He ignores it, and you just get on with it, and absolutely. And so we're talking about all of this, and I see now lightsabers everywhere. There's so many companies, and now they're amazing. My son's got them; he's fighting with them. And Star Wars Theory, you probably know his site, Nia's, and he's got theory sabers now. He's doing beautiful sabers. He decided I have to do these properly. So now they're all hounding me to do my own one that's based on the original, which I realize nobody calls them Luke, or I'm allowed by Lucasfilm to do everything because I've been very respectful. I've only been positive. I've only been supporting it, but it is owned by Disney, and Disney have rooms of lawyers who just are there to say no to everything. So I'm going to do the Roger Christian Origin saber.
There you go.
And I'm working with, there's a guy on YouTube, if you look him up, Hacksmith, he's got 20 million followers. He's a genius engineer. He's literally a genius. He creates, I can't tell you the things that they do. So we've got ideas how to do one that would be a little bit different to other people's and things we could do with it. So I'm kind of doing that now. Yeah, I thought, why not?
Yeah.
There is something that holding on to an original Graflex lightsaber compared to the newer ones that just
there is.
I had to have one, and I'm like, the weight is there. It just feels really cool, and I'm like, I was so lucky to find it on eBay, and I snacked it. I'm like, I got it. It's mine.
Good.
And kept it. But now I feel like there's just so much more of a connection having that time spending reading the book and then having the conversation with you, that it means twice as much to me now than it ever has. So that will be something I wish I could carry around all day long, but people do look at you.
Yeah, I know. Well, I'm going to try to do one with a blade that lights up and sound and everything. So it will look like the original, but I won't call it the original, but everybody will know. So that was a plan now. I'll send you guys a link. I've got a 2-hour 20. It was going to be a Blu-ray release originally for the documentary.
Awesome.
And
love to see it.
That is finished into 6 parts. So now they got to sell it. The people who financed it. That it's the usual. It was made during COVID with very no money. No one would do it. And you will see, and I have Guillermo del Toro, who wanted to be in it, and he's throughout, very erudite, giving his, because Star Wars got him going as a director.
Yeah.
And I have Gareth Edwards, who to me made the one Star Wars film with Rogue One.
Yeah.
Gareth is very, very interesting. He's right throughout. He kind of segments it for him, and his kind of passion for independent and filmmaking and Star Wars and everything, it comes through. They're really good. And Carl Newman, who wrote Fanboys, he directed Fanboys. I've got people like that in it.
That's fantastic.
Bill Harmon, the carpenter who made our R2-D2. See, no one knows these people. So he's here. He lives in Toronto. So I got him in it. And telling stories. I've got David French, and I've got other people. And I really give a homage to Ralph McQuarrie, and they all emphasize that, if you took one person out of this mix, if you took Ralph McQuarrie out, Star Wars wouldn't be the same.
Right.
And I think these people deserve. And then Ben Burt, because I said, I'm sorry to ask you, but would you do? He said, yeah, as long as it's not cut up and put it on YouTube, all this stuff. And I said, no, it won't be. But he gave the best description of how he came up with that sound that I've ever seen. And I never cut it. I just left him to talk it through. It's like, because it's an equal part, Again, if you look at him, he was a student, literally, working the projectors at the local cinema as a job. And George trod him as a student. And what did he do? He didn't go and make spacey sounds on a keyboard. He went to the zoo and recorded pigs and walruses, bears, and created an organic sound. And it's all a part of the layering of what Star Wars is. And I think Alien 2 has the same. I think it's why you can go back and watch them now, and they really live.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So I have a 10-year-old son here now who's like in heaven. He comes with me to all these events, and it's full of Pokemon and dealers and lightsabers. but it wasn't. He never knew what I did. It all came from school and other friends and stuff, and then it slowly dawned on him
That's funny.
what was in my office.
Right.
Yeah.
It's got to be exciting.
Well, Roger,
Yeah.
I wanna take thank you for taking the time
Yes.
to catch us up on everything, and I hope
Not
you
at
can
all.
come back and visit us again. And
I
'cause
definitely-
obviously
yeah.
there's more
I wanna
things
talk
we need to go
Alien.
into.
I'd love to talk Alien and
Yeah.
so
Well-
many other projects as well.
Yeah, we can do a separate one on that anytime.
Mhm.
It's always a joy for me doing these things, and it helped me writing it. And
Yeah, you've been
know-
great. Thank you so much.
well,
Yes, thank you.
I never knew what I made. It's only the fans who now I'm
Mm.
going, oh,
We
the
did.
binoculars.
We did,
Oh, there's
so
this part, and that part is this. I could name everything from
Yeah.
what the fans have found. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome. Well,
All
thank
right.
you. Thank you so much.
Not at
Thank
all.
you so much.
Nice to meet you all.
Nice to
You
meet you.
as well.
It's true. It's like being in a cafe talking, just having a good time. Very nice. It's
Exactly.
a great way to do it.
Yes.